Welcome everyone to Screenfish Radio. I am so glad you could join us this week as we have a conversation about Denis Villeneuve's Dune, his remake of the classic sci-fi work by Frank Herbert. And I am so thrilled this week to have two Dune veterans, if you will. The
hyperbole knows no bounds.
Yes, I'm going to say that you are experts in the text and I cannot say that, but certainly friends. Oh, there we go. Steve's got it. Certainly two friends of mine. In the seats is Dave Voigt and newcomer Steve Mah. Welcome, guys.
Thanks for having us, brother, as always.
Glad you could join us. This week we are talking about Denis Villeneuve's Dune, which tells the story of Paul Atreides, a brilliant and gifted young man born into a great destiny beyond his understanding, and who must travel to the most dangerous planet in the universe to ensure the future of his family and his people. As malevolent forces explode into conflict over the planet's exclusive supply of the most precious resource in existence, only those who can conquer their own fear will survive. As always, this podcast is rated S for spoilers before we get into it, just so you're aware. But guys, I would love to hear what you think. What did you think of Villeneuve's Dune?
I mean, obviously, anytime Villeneuve puts something on the screen, it's going to be something worth watching just in terms of scale and scope. But I really think here he went sort of to a next level, because I can't remember the last time I saw something that was so visually immersive as this film was. I mean, it wasn't world building, it was universe building. It just sucks you in and you just get wrapped up in it all. And I mean, this is one of those things where fans will love it, but people who are, maybe unfamiliar to the territory might not necessarily understand. The book itself is it's hard to, like, it's not a book that is easily sort of convertible to the screen in many ways. And I mean, I kind of love the fact that they were initially marketing as Dune. And then the second we sat down, we see it's like Dune Part 1. I'm like, yes. Okay, they're giving us a chance to have it all come across on the screen well. And I mean, as much as people may hate sort of the ending of this Dune, I kind of understood it, and I at least know where it's going from there. But I mean, from a visual standpoint, I absolutely loved it.
It's interesting you talk about it being visually immersive. I would say that to me, I can remember the last time that I saw a film so visually immersive, and it was Blade Runner 2049, which was Villeneuve.
Yeah.
Now that was shot by I'm forgetting his name now.
Wasn't it Deakins?
Deakins, thank you. Yes.
It was Roger Deakins, wasn't it?
Roger Deakins. Yes. So I had different expectations for this particular film. But after I saw 2049, from what and I was saying to you guys before we started, I'm a Dune virgin. I have no preconceived. I don't even know where the story goes. I can guess, but I don't know where it goes. This I was totally new to Dune.
Hashtag Dune Virgin coming soon.
Hashtag Dune Virgin. Like and subscribe. And no. But no, 2049 to me was just as stunning visually as this particular film. And from what I'd heard about the Dune story and how immersive it was, after I saw Blade Runner, I was like, sure, let's go for it. The Villeneuve does not like to take the easy road. He likes to be challenged, and certainly he's done that here. Steve, what'd you think?
I would have to challenge the assumption that everything Villeneuve does is worthy of seeing. I actually went on a bit of a Villeneuve binge earlier on, because I saw, when Blade Runner 2049 came out, I think we all had a similar reaction, which is, oh, this is actually good. And so I went back and I watched some of his previous work, and I mean, not anything earlier than 2010. So I watched Incendies, Prisoners, and Enemy, and I think he's improved quite a bit. I mean, he was into some strange things, especially with that Gyllenhaal movie, Enemy. That was, in my opinion, kind of kind of not very good. But anyway, I think that he's been given, I think that people have figured out that if you give this man the opportunity to make these kind of movies, that it turns out pretty well. But I think he's got a particular skill for this type of production, where you have a really grand scale, and there's a meditative and really aesthetic aspect, to the whole story. But I mean, I read this book when I was 19 for science fiction and fantasy class as my elective in undergrad university. So, the professor of that class, repeatedly impressed upon us that, this book, it's a sci-fi classic, and it took a very long time for it to get published, was something that they would always bring up. They're like, keep on pressing on, because, you might have a great work like Dune and people won't publish it. But look what happened there. At the time when I read this book, I never really found it that, it's a bit dry. Like, if you actually go back and revisit it, it is kind of dry. And the guy, I still to this day am not quite sure what if he really had an overarching point when he was writing this. I mean, if you read his autobiography, he had this trip to the Oregon sand dunes, and he was really inspired by like this idea of this ecology that, this overriding ecology that could swallow cities and stuff like that. And he had a lot of themes that he wanted to weave into here, but it's still to this day a little unclear to me, what he was trying to do. Like, he claims that he was trying to do a variety of things, and obviously there were a lot of themes, but I don't know if they were, I don't know if this was just his way of kind of expressing all those things at once, or if he had like a really sort of core motivation. That's all a bit beside the point of the movie, but it's just a bit of background for, like, there's a reason why this movie didn't work out so well in the past, I think. So you're trying to adapt source material that doesn't really, you need someone who understands why people who do like it. It doesn't have a really obvious, like, you have to make it in a way that's going to appeal to people generally, and not just people who are really interested in the book for whatever reason. I mean, obviously, I think this movie had a bit of when you watch it, you don't really know what's going on. There's all these grand scenes and all these images of political conflict and mechanics that you think to yourself, well, this looks like it's made for somebody who's read the book. But I still think that just on account of the all the cinematography and the music and the sets and all the work that went into it, I think that a normal person would still probably appreciate that. And I really liked it. It was not primarily for me as much of a story movie as it was just like a movie about feelings, really. Like, you get one feeling after feeling after feeling as you see all those, especially seeing it in IMAX, you see those huge ships, and you see these, events unfolding, and it just really it transports you, And I thought that it was really well done. Anyway, sorry, that was a bit of a tangent, but I mean, the TLDR of that is basically that it's some complex and kind of fraught source material. Like, it has a lot of themes and a lot of intricacies to it that might not be obvious if you just came into this off the street. But for a movie adaptation, I don't think you could improve it too much.
No, yeah, agreed.
Yeah, it's interesting because, as I said, I am the guy who came in off the street. All I heard, you're right. Villeneuve has made some weird stuff. Like, I'm not saying every movie he's done, every movie he's done is not great, but I find at least every movie he's done is at least ambitious. Now, he's gotten more ambitious visually from Arrival through Blade Runner to this. But his stories have always tried to hit a little different. Even Prisoners is a wild trip, man. that's a wild movie.
Prisoners was good. Incendies, I thought, was not very good.
No,
like that entire movie was kind of everybody telling us like they would show us something, and then it would cut to the next scene, and someone would sit down and explain to somebody else everything that we just saw for like half an hour, and be like, thanks for that. And it continued like that over and over. But
no, I could see that. And it was funny, like with Dune, my experience of it was almost like my experience when I went into the Lord of the Rings, because again, same story. I went into Fellowship of the Ring having never opened a book I've opened books, but never opened a Lord of the Rings book.
Oh, you don't have to tell me this.
Yeah, this. And my experience of it was, wow, that was really well done. But I felt like I was missing so much else because I hadn't read the books. I went back and read the book, And what I found frustrating for me, I'm going to talk about Lord of the Rings here, but I mean, like, the level of detail was so intense that it was a difficult read for me. It was like the grass was green, but not the color of green that you would see in one's eye, but the color of green that after, and all this stuff. And I'm like, but then I went back and seeing Fellowship, I'm like, now I see the level of skill it took to make this film, because they managed to achieve that visually. That's how I felt about Dune. When I started watching the film, I would say for me, it took me about 20 minutes to feel like I was getting caught up, because I had no experience. So there's so much exposition to start off with. There is so much, like Dave, you referred to it as universe building. I love that description. It was like hearing about the first 5 seasons of Game of Thrones in 15 minutes. Like, centuries of history was getting thrown at me, and I felt like I should be making notes, like, okay, what do I need to go about this guy? But as the film so at first I was like, oh man, I'm going to get 3 hours of this, I'm going to be so lost. But as the film unfolded and the story really came to life, like you guys, I was really swept away. By the end, I loved it, and I said, I want to see part 2. This is, but I also came out of it and I said, I don't know how somebody who doesn't understand what they're in for is going to appreciate it. I'm actually surprised it's made as much money as it has, because it's not an easy watch. Like, it's not Force Awakens, and I'm not saying it's trying to be, but Force Awakens is a popcorn, throw it down and watch it up and down. This is more of a sprawling, epic, grand historical tale. And for that reason, I was like, I don't know how people are going to respond to this, but people have. And
I kind of updated, like when I made a statement earlier on about, people who don't really have a background appreciating it. Actually, that's a bit disingenuous. I only said that because now I know that people are appreciating it, because I would not have predicted, I would have predicted that only people who read the book would have really appreciated this, because, much of the movie is kind of showing you something that the book tells you. And, for all the people who read it, and also it's been around a long time, so you get this fan base that, has been kind of waiting for something like this. And, much of that enjoyment has to do with saying, like, oh, I've been thinking about this for a long time, but that really is a whole new way of making me feel that, or, seeing that on screen is so powerful, since I've, just had this idea in my mind for, however many years since the book was published. So, but yeah, showing it to somebody off the street, I would have predicted that wouldn't go very well. But I think because it's getting popular and people, I think one of the main factors contributing to the success of this is everyone is just really fed up with remakes and reboots and sequels and remixes, and these remakes and sequels are not even particularly, in my opinion, good. They're an attempt to kind of maybe modernize something, or just kind of recycle it, but there's not a lot of love put into them, I don't think, for the most part. And anything that's original, or attempts to do something different or original or fresh or new, and it's not a recycling of the previous franchises and everything. I think people are really starving for that, to the point that even if they know nothing about this, it's just refreshing for them to see it.
Now, it's interesting you say that, though, because this is a refresh. This is a reboot. This has been on screen twice before. So why do you feel like this is original material?
I mean, it's not a refresh of something that people have seen before. No one really watched those previous, like, if you watched that previous David Lynch film and you enjoyed it, you're a particular type of person. The average person on the street didn't even know that existed until now. So it's not like a reboot of Star Wars or something. It's a reboot of something that didn't work out the first time, and so therefore still nobody knew about it.
Right. That's fair. That's a fair. Okay.
And I mean, think about it. Science fiction has never been an easy sell. I mean, as much as we all love Blade Runner, it died initially at the box office and got its sort of popularity, via home video and VHS and cult following in thereof. And I mean, unless you're a Star Trek or a Star Wars, science fiction has always been a hard sell when it's being translated onto the big screen, like, period. But because of Villeneuve's track record and the stuff that he had done previously, there was this buildup of that we're going to get something different, we're going to get something fresh. And when you combine that with the fact that I mean, I don't think you can discount this. I'm not entirely sure Dune would have done as well had it come out when it was supposed to. I think the timing of the fact of people wanting to get back to the movie theaters definitely is playing a little bit into its success. If it had been released in a normal schedule, sure, it would have been big, it would have been great, and yeah, part two probably would have been greenlit, but I don't think we would have been talking about it as much as we are right now about it. It definitely feels like it's got a different weight to it given the timing of when it was released.
Well, that's fair. That's fair. So what is it that you think is resonating with audiences in this way for this particular product? Like you both said, people are looking for something fresh. You've said, sci-fi is a hard sell, but and we've got the pandemic. But what is it about this story that it like people could be dying to go to the movies and see an original sci-fi film, but people are actually staying going? Like this is a thing now. This has made a significant amount of money.
I mean, in addition to my previous comments, I would say it's not just the fact that it's fresh or that it's, sort of a new franchise that maybe wasn't popular or known before, but it's also the fact that they didn't compromise the material in order to make it into some kind of modern political commentary or like everything I've seen recently, it's been contaminated with, I mean, again, I'm biased here. Like I really don't like it when people do this type of thing. Some people, they feel like, well, that's an appropriate, I guess, method for conveying your political messages to kind of make the characters say things that are relevant to maybe that election year or something. I really don't like that. And I think a lot of people kind of feel like I do, which is, I want to see a story and I want to be transported. I don't want, when Paul Atreides, starts to gain power, I don't want him to start turning orange and talking like Trump. Like, I don't want to think about that. I just want to watch something that's completely, agnostic or I don't want this universe to be aware of modern neologisms. I don't want the characters to say literally or to to say something that somebody would only say in 2021 or, I want to feel like this is a genuine universe that is completely removed from mine. Right. And I think that they did that. They didn't compromise the source material. They didn't try to include like modern American, politics in the story in a way that wasn't in the book. And I think that's refreshing to people too, is to see something that feels really authentic rather than being some sort of a tool to accomplish some other goal.
And I mean, it's big and it takes its time telling its story. I mean, if this had been Justin Lin's Dune, I think this would have been a very, very different film.
The Dune and the Duniest. That's
right. No, but I mean, it's when you're pairing material with source material with a filmmaker, it has to be the right fit. And here it's definitely the right fit because the material gets time to breathe. The story gets time to breathe. And I think that's another thing that's also refreshing to audiences as well, because as much as people love the frenetic go-go pace of, 2 hours and 20 minutes of Diesel and The Rock or John Cena driving cars and blowing shit up, there's also nice to have an alternative on a grand scale as well. And I think this provides that.
It's interesting. I mean, I'm going to talk about this, I think, next week when we talk about the Eternals. And then one of the things about the Eternals right now is it's slow and it does that. It's sprawling, but it's getting hit for it. But again, maybe it's the audience, because people that are going to a Marvel film are looking for Justin Lin.
Or the Russos. They want the spectacle.
They want spectacle, but not Chloe Zhao sprawling epic spectacle. They want pop, boom, pow.
Exactly.
And quip in the middle.
People like to feel sophisticated. I mean, this might seem a bit cynical, but I do think some of this has to do with people. I don't know if people really are that attracted to the underlying story, especially people who haven't read the book or don't know what it's about. I think that, they enjoy the change of pace. And, if you go to a Marvel movie that's 3 hours long, I don't know if you feel particularly good about yourself. Whereas if you go to this movie and it's 3 hours long and you don't really know much about it, but you feel like, oh, did you know that this is it's considered, a really important sci-fi work. and it's got all these political complex themes, and it's subtle, and it takes a lot. You feel kind of like, oh, I'm a sophisticated person who appreciates this, and it's quite different from the other things I'm watching, and it's beautiful and so forth, right? So I think it's quite different than if you made people sit through 3 hours of Marvel, or even if you look at Blade Runner 2049, which didn't do quite as well. That's a sequel to an existing movie. It's got the whole sequel thing going on, and it's I mean, it was very I liked it, but I don't know if it had the same it wasn't this original movie based on a deep source material that had a lot of background world building to it and everything. So I do think there's just a little bit of a popular culture thing going on where people they want to feel in on it, something. Everyone wants to feel in on it. Like when Game of Thrones was going on, there weren't a lot of other things that people were all watching or all talking about, and this is just sort of a natural point for people to gather around and discuss and feel like, yeah, we all saw that, and this is not the same as everything else that's going on. So
yeah, I also would have accepted Zendaya is in it. That and everyone else. No, I'm kidding. No, I think you're right. It honestly, it's funny. You mentioned Blade Runner 2049. I don't want, but to me, it's a little surprising because I think that also surprised me too, because Blade Runner now, although it's celebrated, was not liked at the time. So I don't know why Villeneuve thought it's going to make money if we do it again. I'm glad he did. I thought the film was great. I really, really liked that film. It was one of my favorite films that year. But like, it did what Blade Runner did. That's what surprises me so much about Dune. Because to me, I would put it in the same category, not having a love for the source material, but knowing that it did not do well. It's celebrated now, but at the time it was not that. And it's interesting. It's interesting that you say to me, or that you say, Steve, that it's not that modern sensibilities aren't in there. I mean, I know it's based on the book, which was written in the 70s or before. I'm sorry.
65, I think.
65. But I thought it was highly political. I really did. I thought he was making a point about the battle for oil in the Middle East, and maybe it's just the being in a certain time and culture helps you read certain things into it. But
to clarify, I wasn't saying that he didn't put politics of his time into the book. I was just saying that when people go to watch the movie today, they don't want to hear some veiled reference to something that just happened yesterday on the news, with the director or the screenwriter trying to make a point about that, and also just doing it in a very ham-fisted and kind of transparent way rather than making it subtle. I think that's been going on in a lot of franchises, and I think the fact that people just sort of respected the source material and tried to faithfully portray it, I think that had a positive effect, was all I was saying.
Yeah, no, it's a fair point. It's a fair point. If with the source material, if we're talking about him respecting the source material here, I have not read the book, but I notice a great deal personally of storyline sensibilities that remind me of A New Hope. And I'm not saying it's a Star Wars. I'm not comparing it to Star Wars, but just thematic threads that
it's all Shakespeare.
It's all Shakespeare. Is that it?
No, but really it is when you think about it. I mean, it's the father versus son. It's this versus that. Like there isn't anything overly complex about the story of Dune. It's a very familiar story. It's just, it goes into presentation and what people want to see at a given time. And I mean, Dune gets made because let's face it, Dune gets made because it's Denis Villeneuve and it's an existing intellectual property. If this had been some new idea from some new director, they're not getting $5 for it. That's the reason this got made. Because I mean, there's nothing Hollywood loves more than, I mean, obviously it loves making a statement and doing things like that, but it loves its, pre-existing intellectual properties to try to make a bunch of money off of. And this definitely qualifies.
Wait a minute, Dave. Let's not make accusations here. Surely you're not suggesting that Warner Brothers and Disney like to focus in on previously existing properties. I mean, it's so much originality. Anyway,
I think all those straight to Disney Plus Muppet shows will tell you different, but yeah.
Hey, Muppet Haunted Mansion's a good movie, man.
Yeah, it was fun. I'll give you that.
It was good. Um, well, having said that, we talk about the film, talk about what it strikes a chord. There was a line in it I thought was particularly interesting, and I wondered what you thought it was. Jamis or Jamis, I don't know how to pronounce the name correctly, but makes a comment and says the mystery of life isn't a problem to solve, but a reality to experience. I was just wondering. That's a kid's toy. I was just wondering, based on, like, to me that was a really interesting sentence. I was just wondering what that means to you and how you feel that connects with the story.
For me, I mean, I would say it's one of those things that it is true on both ends of the spectrum. I mean, I think it's really comes down to just the story of Paul, and he is this sheltered kid of privilege who is about to sort of jump into a different world of that he has no experience with. And I mean, it's watching that journey of this kid who is essentially the spoiled brat becoming a leader of men. And I mean, that's really the core of the story for me. And I think that's the core of that line as well. Just seeing his journey from entitled young prince to leader of a world.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not an authority really. Like, I have read the book, but I'm not really an authority on the Dune universe, especially since I haven't reread it in a while, and or read the sequels. But
we are according to Steve, so it's okay.
Yeah.
True.
We don't have any true experts, really, proper nerds in this call with respect to the Dune universe, at least. But my interpretation of that was sort of similar to what Dave said, which is that, I mean, I would sort of boil it down to saying that, like, when you're saying that, I could give a whole philosophical, rant about, the meaning of that phrase detached from the context, but in the context of the movie and or the book. I thought that was a line that was said later in the book by Paul. Could be mistaken, but it's he intended this book in part to kind of warn against Messiah characters or against leaders being followed blindly or amassing a lot of power, and so I guess you could interpret that as saying that you should ease up on the amount of control that you try to exert over the forces that be, right? Like, you should not try to control everybody and everything. You should kind of be more receptive to the way that things are, and the needs of the many and so forth, rather than trying to impose your will upon them. Like, that's one interpretation that I might take from that, but again, you can take that with a grain of salt.
The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. We're getting into Star Trek 2 territory now.
No, it's true, and I'm glad you said that, Steve. I thought the journey of Paul in this film is really, really interesting to me. Again, comparing him to 60s and 70s, what's the word? Heroes' journeys, if you will. I always go to Luke, and this guy and Paul is like a jerk. he's a brat. He is, but he comes out of this system. I like that you said control. Like, the whole movie to me was about control. And that's why I thought it was so interesting. That's why I saw such politics in it, because in the fight, while everybody's fighting for control, Paul is sort of leaning into his dreams and his visions and these things that he doesn't understand. I think I think one of the lines he says is something to the effect of, the desert is calling me, or something to that. I mean, everybody's got these sort of, they're putting their pieces on the chessboard, trying to outmaneuver one another and draw them in here. And, it really feels like a chess game is going on, except for Paul, who just sort of wanders into the desert on this external vision and mission. And that's what I thought it was really interesting. This idea of a mystery to life is something that I think is particularly interesting in this film. because they allow that to sort of bubble underneath the surface. Everybody's doing chess games, and where I really connected with was this idea that there was this sort of mystery going on around him that he was part of, that was bigger than him, and everybody was just sort of trying to ignore it. And this sort of idea is there's just this idea of leaning into your action, leaning into reality, as opposed leaning into what you're, leaning into the larger picture. I love this idea of mystery versus the problem to solve. I just thought that was a really interesting dichotomy to hold up to, if that makes any sense. I realized I said a lot of things not very well, but
well, could Paul Atreides have been boarded a major in Jerusalem from an immaculate conception and then just sort of walked out into the wilderness? I mean, again, it just goes back to the root of the story. Like, there are so many stories that deal with so many of like themes like this, and I mean, it's one of those things that it's one we're always going to debate, and it's one we're always going to sort of chew on, which kind of makes it fascinating, at least from my end of things anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%.
Yeah, this thing about this dichotomy between kind of exerting control and then, or being receptive and sensitive to, things as they are, I think is key dichotomy. Like, you have this desert. I think part of the purpose of, like, he had this experience where he went and he did all this research on these dunes in Oregon and how they were, they could swallow a city essentially. And it seemed like some really raw, dry scientific facts kind of got him started on this line of thought. And then when he wrote this novel, he added all these political themes and these personal themes. But this idea of, and then there's obviously the Middle East, and there's some very transparent metaphors there with the indigenous population, kind of being oppressed by these external powers coming in and mining the oil or the spice from the planet. Like, I don't know if it's that sophisticated, really. It's a kind of a straightforward metaphor there, but just the idea of you've got this the way that things are, the environment, this vast desert environment that kind of, you can try to control it. You're trying to deal with it and subdue it and make it do what you want it to. But ultimately, there are these powers and these forces that are beyond your control and which are bigger than you. And, you should learn from them rather than always trying to, subdue them or control them. Because if you try too hard to do that, you might get bit, is also another lesson that tends to come up in these types of stories. But, that theme shows up very often in a lot of movies and literature, right? Is that, this dichotomy between, your perspective, your personal point of view, and attempts to subdue things and make them work for you and impose yourself, rather than learning and accepting and receiving and understanding, and seeking the unknown and so forth. So
it's such an interesting character arc for me as I watch it, because there's so many different things at play. I really do feel like, I know it's such a terrible comparison, because again, this is a classic work of sci-fi. The other was an HBO show, but I feel like it's very Game of Thrones-esque. Like, it tries to balance so much of that political insight with almost a mystical edge, and a broad world, and how it all sort of comes together, wrestling with those tensions. I really think I think that, to me, that's part of the intrigue and the appeal. Is there's something more than just it's tackling a number of different things and trying to throw them together.
But I mean, you could say the same thing about Star Wars. You could say the same thing about stories from feudal Japan or feudal England, or France in the Middle Ages, or so many different kind of stories. I don't think it just gets narrowed to something sort of in the genre world. Really, this is one of those stories that you can apply on a broader spectrum. They're just in a desert planet with giant space worms and all their eyes are glowing.
That's right. And again, being new to this, I kept waiting for Beetlejuice to show up.
There is a reason why this is coming out so late, right? Like, all these other stories, like Star Wars has been around and it was immediately popular. And I mean, it was a movie, granted, it wasn't adapted. But there's a reason why this story is different. And it wasn't popular or wasn't well known by people up until, somebody finally adapted it, decades after the fact. The average person on the street wouldn't have known about Dune if you weren't a sci-fi reader, or you weren't interested in David Lynch or something. Like, you might not have known about it. And also the fact that it didn't get published for a while when he was shopping around to get it published. I think there's something a little more you know the themes are a little more convoluted and a little more complex in a way that kind of isn't as immediately obvious or accessible to the average person. And it's not a standard hero's journey where you have like something obvious that you want to happen and you have someone you can really root for and it's got a nice ending. It's more of a dense and kind of tangled weave of thoughts and ideas. So I think there is something different about this story. I mean, yeah, the fact that he's not a typical hero's journey character. And then I think there's something really interesting in this story about the lack of AI, and it's like on purpose, right? Like in Star Wars, you don't really think about AI because maybe just, I don't know, it wasn't really, Star Wars is not really hard sci-fi, but he purposefully removes AI from his story, and he gives this justification that, well, it was really dangerous and so it was banned. And then all these functions, you're really exploring the human spirit and the human brain, and it really focuses in on humanity. And I think that's also something that's kind of unique and about the Dune universe and the aesthetic.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that.
It's understanding what a perfect storm it takes to get something like this made and made properly. Because I mean, I do think there is a bit of a general misconception in the universe out there. It's like, oh, somebody wrote the book, they'll turn it into a movie, easy peasy. It's like adapting a book into a movie doesn't always work. In fact, it rarely works. When you really look back at everything, you've got to have the right filmmakers and the right artists paired together to make this stuff happen. And I think finally with Dune, we got that here.
Yeah, I think that I couldn't agree with you more on that one. There's quite a mix, and it's the right mix. Absolutely, for sure.
I agree with that. I think a lot of people are excited, even like I said, even with the sort of cynical comments I made earlier about saying that lots of people are kind of piling onto this just to, also agreeing with Dave, like they haven't been to the theaters, they've been stuck inside for, almost, like a year and a half plus. There hasn't been anything that hasn't been a sequel or hasn't been some kind of, popcorn thing. And they hear about this and they think, oh, well, this is something I haven't heard of. It seems intricate. It seems sophisticated. I want to know what's going on. I don't want to be left out. Even with me saying all that, I still think people can sense, that something was done here, that it faithfully adapted the source material. It had all the right, it hit all the marks. Like it got the right, it got the right director, the right, the right cast, the right aesthetic. It hit all those marks. And I think people can sense that, Hollywood still can make things of, significant cultural and aesthetic import. We're not stuck. We aren't stuck after all in this, kind of declining spiral of sequels and reboots of increasingly poor quality, right? So I think people can sort of sense that, and I think everyone's excited about that, even if they didn't fully appreciate the story or this franchise. I think everyone's kind of getting a buzz off of that.
You might not like it, but it's one of those things that gives off the aura where you have to respect it.
Yeah, that's a good way to describe it. Actually, I hadn't thought of it that way, but you're right. It's one of those films that, well, like I said, like I felt that about Lord of the Rings, which everybody adores. I said, it's not my favorite film, but I respect it. I can see it's well made and it's really well done. And I think Dune reminds me of it in that respect.
I mean, from those films to even something like Lawrence of Arabia, with people can say, oh, it's just Peter O'Toole riding on a camel for 4 hours, but you when you watch it, there's still something about it that you still have to respect. And I definitely think Dune sort of hits that window.
I'm looking forward to the Lawrence of Arabia director's cut where the sandworms showed up. Actually, crossover. Not many people know it's was only in a special edit, but
David Lean was a sci-fi junkie. That's absolutely true.
That's right. He was. Guys, this has been fun. Thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. Let's screen it or skip it. Dune, screen it or skip it.
Oh, it's a screen it for me without question. See it as big and as loud as you possibly can. because it's one of those things that will make you want to get back to the experience of watching movies, which I understand for everyone, especially these days, isn't the easiest thing. But if you're looking for that reason to sort of get back out there and being able to experience something, this is the film.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah, I agree. Go see it. See it in IMAX. I mean, what else are you going to do?
Well, if you're in the States, you can watch it on your phone.
David Lynch would not like that. I don't know if you've seen the clip that I'm referencing when I say that. There's a clip of David Lynch getting really upset about people watching movies on their phone.
Yeah.
And anyone who is listening to this can go look that up. I can't believe you thought you saw a movie on your effing telephone. Anyway.
And after this, we're all going to shut off our Zoom and watch the Doogie Howser remake on Disney Plus.
That's original content. She's in Hawaii and it's a girl. So it's
completely different.
Completely different. It's a screen it for me, and it's because the film is gorgeous. I agree with seeing it on screen. It is an IMAX stunning piece. It is absolutely wonderful. Having said that, I still can't say that I think everybody's going to like it, because I think that it's one of those things that I know a lot of people that are hungry for the next sequel and reboot, and are more looking forward to Spider-Man than they are any other film in right now. And I think if you go in thinking this is going to be that, you're going to be really frustrated from the start. But I do think the film is stunning. I think it's incredible, and I really, really liked it. I thought it was really well done. So it's a screen it for me, but I offer that asterisk, if you will, that contention.
Art is and always will be subjective, and I mean, I think that's the reason why we're here talking right now, isn't it?
Yes,
I agree with everything you said. It's just that I'm sort of changing my mind a little bit about recommending it to other people, just knowing that it is getting very popular even among people who didn't read the book, and knowing that, I feel like that sort of tips it a bit where it becomes more worth it to see what's going on and to just see, okay, even if you don't really care that much about this universe or this story or whatever, it's beautiful, and it's got a lot of vibes to it, and everyone's talking about it. I don't think that there's if you lose a bit of time out of your life to see this movie, I don't think that it's a bad thing, even if you don't quite get the point. But that being said, I would agree with all the caveats that I don't think I would not have assumed that very many people who didn't read the book would like this, or but that I was wrong. Apparently a lot of people are enjoying it more than I thought. So
yeah, absolutely 83% right now on Rotten Tomatoes. The fan scores are high. It's very popular, and I think it's deservedly so. So I will say this too: if you're a casual viewer and you're like, hey, I really want to see Dune, and you have it on HBO Max, don't watch it on HBO Max. Go to the theater, find an IMAX, and enjoy it, because it is so sweeping. It is it is maybe one of the most beautiful films of the year, and it is really something to see. Well, guys, thank you so much. I really appreciate having you on. Now is the chance where we can plug your stuff if you want. Mr. Voigt, why don't you tell us a little bit about In the Seats? And
well,
what's going on?
What else can I say? In the Seats is one of those, I guess, at least from my perspective, I'm partial. I'm the editor and publisher over at In the Seats, but it's, it is a nice one-stop shop for basically where we talk about anything film, television, the moving image at large. We cover a lot of film festivals, film, TV. We love to write about it and talk about it, and we love it when you come read about it. And also, speaking on the talking side of things, we also have our In the Seats with podcast, which you can find on all major podcast providers, really, where I sit down and interview in a very light and conversational fashion, like filmmakers, actors, but also behind the scenes people, editors, producers, or even people like our friend Steve. And we talk about issues of the day and what's going on and all the crazy stuff that's happening in this world of business of show that for some reason Steve and I are still in on a daily basis, and we don't know why.
we will message each other that we will go back and forth. And why are we doing
about daily? Yeah,
Yeah.
daily, every other day, something like that.
And Steve, I know you got your YouTube channel. Is it Negating Silence?
Yeah, that's what it is. It has nothing to do with anything that has just occurred at all. It's just a small YouTube channel that I happen to have. There's no commentary on there, no film reviews, no philosophy, no. There's jokes about philosophy, but one day I might start producing that type of content, analysis and critique and stuff like that. But for now, there's just a bunch of absolutely unrelated stuff on that channel. Just cover songs, some art projects, funny songs, parody songs. Not related at all, but thanks.
No, it may not be related, but you've got some great stuff on there. I've seen some really great stuff that you've produced. I mean that. Especially some of your parody songs, they're really well done. Guys, thank you. I really appreciate the chance to have you on. And for you at home, a reminder. And for you at home, a reminder that you can find us wherever podcasts are available. If you go to the podcast page at screenfish.net, you can download Fishing for More, where you can get questions to help you get the conversation started about Dune and with the people that you see it, if you so desire. And we also have our YouTube channel as well. You can look up Screenfish on YouTube. You can like and subscribe that as well. We hope that you'll join us and continue on. Guys, I Steve, Dave, love having you on, love our conversation. And for you at home, we started the conversation. This was Screenfish.